speak again at a board meeting. First of all, I would like to thank President Holloway for his most recent response and letter to me, which I'm just going to read a few sentences of so that it's in the record. And I really appreciate your frank comments and your willingness to try to rectify and move answers to this situation. And I'm now reading directly from President Holloway's letter. He said, in your initial letter, you asked for assurance that our process for resolving pay equity issues will be transparent and fair. I give you my word, and I will keep my word. And then I'm going on to read another paragraph. The proper space for these types of claims, and ideally the resolutions of those claims, should be found in a pay equity review process that is responsive, responsible, and efficient. This process, furthermore, should assure that the claims are addressed as quickly as possible between claimants and the university administration. So again, Dr. Holloway, thank you for those assurances. I'm a little dismayed in hearing Dr. Wolf's testimony today, but as you all know, we have the strongest pay equity law in the nation, and we are looking forward to Rutgers University living up to the letter and the spirit of the law. So thank you all once again for allowing me this opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Senator, as always. Our last speaker today is Deepa Kumar, President of the AAUP AFT.
Mr. Chair, I've given her permission to speak.
Can you hear?
Dr. Kumar, are you there?
I am here.
Yes, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I am no longer president of the AAUP AFT. So let me introduce myself. I am a professor in the Journalism and Media Studies Department in New Brunswick. I'm also the inaugural chair of the Strategies and Tactics for Improving Diversity and Excellence Committee at New Brunswick at the invitation of the SVPE. I'm one of 3 faculty directors of the Faculty Diversity Collaborative and the founding co-chair of the University Committee on Diversity, Race, and Gender. I begin with this introduction to demonstrate my deep commitment to gender and race equity and to the university's mission of enhancing diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I want to speak to the question of investment in equity and the university's proposed revisions to investment policy. At present, our equity process is a product of the contract settlement of 2019. That was when actually I was president of the Rutgers AAUP AFT. And I will be the first to admit that this process that we won in 2019 is far from perfect. And the union and university have been in the process of negotiating a process that is fair, transparent, and just. But it was nevertheless a remarkable step forward, and labor historians have called it a historic accomplishment and a trendsetter. It was a method by which to realize and make tangible the incredible Diane B. Allen Pay Equity Act that Senator Weinberg was so instrumental to passing in 2018. And what we sought to do was to make the law a reality for faculty at Rutgers, saving them the time, energy, not to mention resources needed to file a lawsuit. Unfortunately, despite following the process, I did not get equity. Thus, I am part of a lawsuit against Rutgers for its violation of the Diane B. Allen Pay Equity Act. The gap between my salary and that of my comparator is close to $50,000, $50,000. Yet I have been offered 1/5 of that amount through a process used by human resources and compensation services that is completely distorted and unfair. How, I ask you, is it equity when 80% of the gap with my comparator continues to be maintained? We have seen the same with other faculty and even worse for our colleagues at Camden. How can we say that we are invested in diversity, equity, and inclusion, or claim to be creating a beloved community when we have such a flawed process that treats so many of us who are women and people of color as second-class citizens? Rutgers recently renamed a building in honor of the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. It is worth recalling that Justice Ginsburg was part of a class action lawsuit for pay discrimination. She and her colleagues at Rutgers Newark won a historic lawsuit and received substantial pay increases. If Rutgers is serious about honoring Justice Ginsburg, if it is serious about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I urge you, President Holloway, and the Board of Governors to work with the union to bring about real pay equity. There is currently a proposal that has been put forward, as Nancy explained earlier, and that is actually, as Senator Weinberg just said from President Holloway's letter, this proposal is, quote, responsive and responsible. And I hope that you will accept it and put an end to the distress that so many of us have been put through. I urge you also to reject the anti-union law firm Jackson Lewis's advice and its opaque and unfair algorithm, and to instead rely on our own faculty and our expertise to help solve the problem of inequity. President Holloway, you can make history by turning Rutgers into the first university that truly values equity so that we can set an example for other universities to follow. I will end with this. Lawyer Nancy Smith of the law firm Smith & Mullen put it this way last month on Twitter after the first tranche of cases were released, quote, Rutgers University needs new HR and legal leadership based on ethics and justice, end quote. This is good advice, I believe, from one of the authors of the Diane B. Allen Act, and I hope that it is taken seriously. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you for your remarks, Dr. Kumar. That concludes the section of the meeting on public comments. President Holloway, would you like to make any remarks at this point?
Very briefly, as I mentioned before, I'm not able to comment on current litigation, so I'm afraid my silence is only governed by that fact. Lots to say, but this is not the appropriate venue for me to say anything. I do want to respond to the two students who spoke about investment policy as it relates to divestment and climate, what I'll call a climate social justice plan. My words, not theirs. Brian Ballantyne, who worked with the task force that led to the creation of the Office of Climate Action, pointed out to me that the Climate Action Plan specifically speaks to supporting community resilience. The divestment committee furthermore recommended reinvesting in environmentally friendly funds. So to the extent to which that is welcome news to the students, I want them to understand that. I also, lament the reference twice to demands that are forthcoming. It'd be much more productive if we can actually just have a conversation. You might find that different aspects, like in this case, the administration is already on your side. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, as always. Moving on to committee reports. Chair Hundley of the Committee on Academic and Student Affairs, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Committee on Academic and Student Affairs met on December 1st. The meeting was called to order at 1 p.m. It was held in person and virtual via Zoom. The meeting was, as I mentioned, the meeting was called to order at 1 p.m. First on the agenda was a proposed resolution establishing the Bachelor of Fine Arts in Visual Art degree program at the Camden College of Arts and Sciences. Dr. Antonio Tillis, Chancellor of Rutgers University Camden, stated that the BFA in Visual Art major proposed by the Faculty of Arts and Sciences Camden is a professional multidisciplinary degree program that prepares students for competitive careers in the art world. He added that the program includes a cross-disciplinary curriculum that is focused primarily within the Department of Visual Media and Performing Arts, and that the students will receive rigorous training in visual problem solving, theoretical and practical understanding of contemporary art, history, and diversity of the arts and professional art practices. The committee agreed to endorse the resolution for board approval, and it has been placed on today's agenda. Following that, Chancellor Tillis continued that the School of Business Camden is proposing a Master of Science in Finance Wealth Management degree program designed to provide the skills necessary for success in the practice of wealth management. He explained that the curriculum will be grounded in investments, financial technology, and psychology. He also noted that the 30-credit program will be delivered online through a mix of synchronous and asynchronous courses, and that the students will take one 3-credit foundational course and will cover the principles of finance, 12 credits of core courses that focus upon the essential elements of wealth management, for instance, investments, financial technology, and psychology, and 15 credits of elective courses. Chancellor Tillis further detailed that full-time students will obtain the degree in 12 months, while part-time students have up to 5 years to complete the degree program. The committee also agreed to endorse that resolution for board approval, and it has been placed on the consent agenda. Next up was a proposed revision to University Policy 60.1.33, Title IX Policy and Grievance Procedures. Mr. J. Michael Gower, Executive Vice President, Chief Operating Officer, and University Treasurer, presented the proposed revisions to University Policy 60.1.33, Title IX Policy and Grievance Procedure, known as Title IX Policy. He reminded the committee that extensive revisions to the Title IX policy were reviewed by this committee and passed by the university's Board of Governors in December of 2020 in response to federal statutory revisions to Title IX. He added that since that time, the Policies and Procedures Subcommittee of the Advisory Committee, in accordance with its charge, developed proposed revisions to the Title IX policy to clarify certain topics, align with best practices, and ensure continued compliance with the requirements of the current Title IX regulations and other related federal and state laws. Mr. Gower then asked Mr. John Hoffman, Senior Vice President and General Counsel, who further elaborated on the judicial decisions that prompted the proposed changes and explained that many of the subcommittee's recommendations are based on the Title IX office's experiences in implementing the Title IX policy for the past year, as well as feedback from staff, faculty, and students. The committee agreed to endorse the action for board approval, and it has been placed on the consent agenda. The committee then met in executive session to discuss personnel matters, including faculty tenure and recommendation. The committee agreed to endorse these recommendations for board approval, and they have also been placed on today's consent agenda. The meeting was closed at 3 p.m. and Mr. Chair, this concludes the report on the Committee of Academic and Student Affairs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hundley. The Committee on Finance and Facilities, Mr. Tambusi, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The committee met in person and via Zoom on Monday, November 15th, beginning at 9 a.m. A number of matters were presented for action. Executive Vice President, Chief Financial Officer J. Michael Gower presented for endorsement 3 proposed resolutions. First proposed resolution approved Phase 5 of the Administrative and Student Information Systems Initiatives Project, authorizing the next phase of the Administration and Student Information Systems Initiative Project. This will advance implementation of the human resources and payroll systems, student information systems, constituent relationship management system, and other related efforts. The total amount of funding in this phase would be $38.85 million and would provide funding starting January 1 through December 31, 2022. Second proposed resolution was accepting and certifying the financial report on Rutgers allocation and transfer of resources across campuses for the period of July 1, 2020 2020 through June 30th, 2021. This resolution will fulfill the state of New Jersey's requirement that the Board of Governors accept and certify the financial report for fiscal year 2021, including activity for each chancellor-led unit and central administration. The third proposed resolution authorized a 2-year contract extension with Elsevier, Inc. for the purchase of nursing licensure exam review and preparation services. This proposal requests to extend a contract for a single source vendor. The committee was provided with an overview and background on each proposal, and each one, the 3 proposals presented to the committee for consideration received full endorsement from the Committee on Finance and Facilities. Mr. Chair, these resolutions are found on the consent agenda. Thereafter, Executive Vice President, Chief Operating Officer Antonio Calcato presented for endorsement the proposed resolution that would approve a revised scope for the one-stop and computer center project at Rutgers University, Newark, also revising the cost of the approved project. The committee endorsed the proposed resolution. Mr. Chair, this resolution is found on the consent agenda. The committee was also presented with certain matters for information. Mr. Calcato provided the committee with an update on the HUD project in New Brunswick and the Build Back Better Regional Challenge grant application. He also provided the committee with an update on the employee vaccine mandate and the considerations for a solar power purchase agreement. For the hub, he shared a long history of the project and preparation for this application to the federal government. He gave an overview of the project and how the university and medical school could be placed in this very large complex. Mr. Calcato then shared an update on the employee vaccine mandate, noting that in compliance with President Biden's executive order requiring employees of federal contractors to be fully vaccinated against COVID-19, Rutgers is requiring all university employees to be fully vaccinated against COVID-19. Mr. Calcato let the committee members know that there is additional time provided so that the employees can get vaccinated or ask for a medical or religious exemption. Mr. Calcato concluded with a discussion of the possibility of an additional solar power purchase agreement, similar to the ones that positively impact Rutgers in the past. Mr. Gower provided the committee with an overview of the federal and state COVID relief funds and how these funds have been used through September 30th, 2021. Rutgers was awarded $128 million for emergency direct student relief aid in the 3 funding packages received. Approximately $53.9 million in the last fiscal year, and the remaining $74 million started reaching students in November. The university was awarded $241 million in institutional funds from federal and state awards to help during these uncertain times. Rutgers received a total of $219.7 million from the CARES and CRRSAA Acts. And as of September 30th, there was $5.5 million not committed. That is earmarked for additional financial aid and support for high-need students and other initiatives that provide support for safe and responsive academic and student life support services as we return to campus. Mr. Gower concluded with an overview of funding from the American Rescue Plan funding. The first component is $74 million of direct student financial aid funding. Students began receiving these awards during the first part of November. The second portion of the ARP funds for institutional aid support will be used in a similar way to previous awards. Associate Treasurer Adam Day provided the annual strategic financial indicators and debt portfolio review. Mr. Day reviewed the recent history of capital financing at Rutgers and explained that the strategic financial indicators are a set of metrics used by leaders in higher education to monitor institutional financial performance. Mr. Day explained to the committee that as a result of the impact of COVID-19 on the university's financial performance and the increase in total debt, several of the debt-related financial metrics were affected. The university's debt policy was updated in 2017, and the metrics regarding debt affordability and debt capacity are reviewed annually. Mr. Chair, this concludes the report of the Committee on Finance and Facilities.
Thank you, Mr. Tambusi. Thank you very much. Chair Heather Taylor of the Committee on Audit, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Committee on Audit met in person and virtually via Zoom on Wednesday, October 27th at 9 a.m. Ms. Shelley Massey, KPMG lead partner, and Ms. Lauren Swigart, KPMG senior manager, reported on the financial statement audit for the year ended June 30th, 2021. Ms. Massey stated that the financial statements are complete with the exception of the information required from the state of New Jersey for GASB statement number 75, accounting and financial reporting for post-employment benefits other than pension. However, this addition would not affect the bottom line of the financials. Ms. Massey and Ms. Swigart highlighted the corrected and uncorrected audit misstatements and required communications for the audit. Ms. Massey confirmed the audit report will have a clean, unmodified opinion. The committee accepted the financial statements conditionally so that the committee chair can do the final sign-off for issuance when the information is obtained by the state. Mr. J. Michael Gower, Executive Vice President, Chief Financial Officer, and University Treasurer, provided an overview of the impact that COVID-19 had on the university's financial condition and operation. Mr. Gower explained that there was a significant reduction in tuition, but also an increase in investment income and considerable cost savings resulting from improved expense management. Mr. Gower expressed his biggest concern relating to the pandemic's impact is the university's need to remain prudent and cautious as the university returns to a semblance of normal. Mr. Eugene Simon, Associate Vice President and Deputy Chief Enterprise Risk Management, Ethics and Compliance Officer, provided a status update on initiatives to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the university's compliance program. Mr. Simon highlighted achievements and gaps identified from the university's compliance program review. Ms. Ruth Philo, Chief Audit Executive, informed the committee on changes to the 2021 annual plan and then provided the 2022 annual audit plan. The committee unanimously approved the 2022 annual audit plan. Ms. Philo also shared an update on the past due audit recommendations. The committee then met in executive session with the auditors, Ms. Massey and Ms. Swigart, and separately with Mr. Gower and Mr. Hoffman. Mr. Chair, that concludes my report on the Committee on Audit.
Thank you, Chair Taylor. Thank you very much. Chair Amy Towers of the Committee on Health Affairs, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Committee on Health Affairs met November 10th in a hybrid virtual and Zoom meeting. Dr. Frank Ganassi, President and Chief Executive Officer of University Behavioral Healthcare and University Correctional Healthcare, cited 3 matters that required the committee's endorsement to move forward for Board of Governors approval. The first being minutes of the University Behavioral Healthcare Leadership Committee meeting in July 2021. The second being University Behavioral Healthcare staff appointments, reappointments, and clinical privileges of September 2021. And third, the University Behavioral Healthcare's quality improvement report for the first quarter of 2021. All 3 matters were endorsed by the committee and will be moved under the consent agenda. Dr. Ganassi then provided an update and explained that UBHC has dramatically increased the number of its community school programs, noting that the programs operate in 9 counties, and 137 schools across the state of New Jersey. He also stated that UBHC continues to grow its maternal wraparound program, which provides case management and peer support for pregnant women with opioid abuse disorders, and also received an expansion grant. Dr. Ganassi then discussed call center operations and the opening of new lines, including the COVID coordinating entity call line and the COVID Connect line. Dr. Ganassi also provided an overview of UBHC's triennial survey conducted virtually by the Joint Commission from March 22nd, 2021 through March 25th, 2021. Finally, Dr. Ganassi concluded with an update on new lines of business related to the new additional treatment center and various potential partnerships with large organizations relating to eating disorders and individuals with autism. In our spirit of this is what excellent looks like, we invited Dr. Anna Natale Pereira, who's the Associate Professor of Medicine, also Director of the Division of General Internal Medicine and Assistant Dean for Primary Care and Community Initiatives. And Dr. Natale Pereira provided an overview of primary care and community initiatives for the New Jersey Medical School. Dr. Natale Pereira reviewed the mission and vision for the Office of Primary Care and Community Initiatives and discussed the history of New Jersey Medical School's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Dr. Natale Pereira also discussed the work of the Primary Care Task Force and detailed the Dean's Primary Care Leadership Initiative, which focuses on establishing innovation within primary care that integrated students, residents, and faculty to participate in new programs, models, and partnerships. Dr. Natale Pereira stated that the Office of Primary Care and Community Initiatives became instrumental in finding opportunities for students to serve their community during the pandemic and reviewed several specific opportunities. She also reviewed the Removing Barriers for Success Scholarship Program, highlighted students that received this grant, and discussed community-engaged service learning opportunities. She reviewed the type of service and the number of students that participated in the CESL Fair. Dr. Natale Pereira concluded her presentation with a path forward for the Office of Primary Care and Community Initiatives. Dr. Vicente Gracias, Senior Vice Chancellor for Clinical Affairs and Vice President for Health Affairs, updated the Committee on Rutgers Health. Dr. Gracias began with a review of student and employee COVID-19 vaccination rates at the university and also discussed on-campus points of distribution. Dr. Gracias also discussed planning around flu immunizations, as well as the development of the My Campus Pass symptom checker app, which provides a daily symptom checker, COVID testing adherence, and vaccine adherence. He then discussed testing and contract tracing metrics and noted how successful both strategies have been. Dr. Gracias also reviewed health education and explained that there has been a focus on academic service line strengthening. He highlighted the Rutgers Health Emergency Medicine Service Line workforce redesign currently being evaluated and discussed work being done with advanced care providers. Dr. Gracias also discussed the Future of Work Task Force and elaborated on the work of the Clinical Working Group. Dr. Gracias concluded his report by reviewing the results of the RBHS Robert Wood Johnson Barnabas Health Professional Wellness Survey, reviewing results from the Student Wellness Survey, highlighting the mental health resources available to nurses on the COVID-19 front lines, and providing clinical leadership updates. Dr. Brian Strom, Chancellor for Rutgers Biomedical and Health Sciences and EVP for Health Affairs, reviewed his goal as Chancellor in RBHS statistics at a glance. He then discussed RBHS actual financial performance since FY14 and the major sources of revenue over the last 6 years. Dr. Strom also provided an overview of RBHS extramural awards and reviewed awards by category. Dr. Strom then discussed the relationships with RBHS clinical partners and went into detail about the master affiliation agreement signed between Rutgers and RWJ Barnabas. Dr. Strom also discussed the Rutgers RWJ Barnabas Rising Stars program and explained that Rutgers was able to retain 40% of the students in the FY21 class. Dr. Strom reviewed the integrated practice agreement signed in December of 2020, which includes the vision, mission, and major goals of the agreement. Dr. Strom moved on to provide a capital planning update and outlined the RBHS physical master plan, including the construction initiatives underway. Lastly, Dr. Strom reviewed new appointments and ongoing searches within RBHS and concluded his report with a review of fundraising goals for RBHS over the last 6 years. Finally, Ms. Kathleen Bramwell, Senior Vice Chancellor of Finance and Administration, provided the RBHS financial update. This concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chair Towers. Vice Chair of the Board, Mr. William Best, for the consent agenda, please.
Sure, Mr. Chair. Are there any items that the members want to remove from the consent agenda? Upon recommendation of the Governor's Executive Committee, the Committee on Academic and Student Affairs, the Committee on Finance and Facilities, and the Committee on Health Affairs, Mr. Chair, I move that the board approve the items contained in the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. May I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please so signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Unanimously passed. Thank you very much. Mr. Gower, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am reporting on the November 18th meeting of the Joint Committee of Investments. Chief Investment Officer Jason McDonald and I briefed the committee on the university spending policy, which is 4% of a rolling 13-quarter market value average, and recommended to the committee that no changes be made. The committee accepted this recommendation. Mr. McDonald reviewed slight recommended changes to the investment policy statements, asset allocation policy ranges due to the maturation of the portfolio. A change from endowment office to investment office was also reviewed and endorsed. The board just approved this, and the board of trustees will consider it later today. Mr. McDonald and our consulting firm FEG reviewed the following manager recommendations. One in private equity, another in private equity and venture capital, a third in venture capital, fourth in diversifying strategies, and a fifth also in diversifying strategies. The total of those recommendations were $40 million. Mr. McDonald reviewed the current portfolio rebalancing process, portfolio priorities, as well as the remaining FY22 pipeline and an early preview of FY23 pipeline considerations for investments. Mr. Lewis Kish of the Investment Office reviewed internal and external investment management expenses with the committee. And Mr. Stephen Hodson, Mr. Greg Dowling, and Mr. McDonald discussed the final fiscal year-end values, long-term investment pool performance, and the current market environment. Mr. Hodson of the consulting firm discussed preliminary performance of the long-term investment pool as of September 30th, 2021 for 1, 3, and 5 year periods. The long-term investment pool returned 26.7%, 11.4%, and 11.1% respectively. Mr. Chair, that concludes my report.
Mr. Gower, thank you very much. Chair John Oliver of the University Senate, the floor is yours.
My apologies. I locked my screen by mistake. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The University Senate began its academic year welcoming President Holloway for his annual address to the Senate. The president reviewed his core initiatives, including institutional strategic clarity, the beloved community, and academic excellence. He then discussed his strategic senior hires and outlined his initiatives for this year. Those include an Office of University Labor Relations within the Office of the President's Task Force on Carbon Neutrality and Climate Resilience, with President Holloway calling for a carbon neutral Rutgers by 2040, and a commitment to build relationships with faculty, students, staff, alumni, and other leaders locally throughout the state and the federal government. In his Senate address, President Holloway referred to his intentional efforts to clarify university governance and the building of collaborative relationships with the University Senate. Evident of that philosophy, we have representatives of the Senate participating in the Future of Work Task Force, the New Brunswick Academic Master Plan, reviews of centers and institutes within RBHS, and have worked with leadership on each of the campuses. The Senate also participated in the inauguration of President Holloway. We were represented on the inauguration committee, and as chair, I was honored to represent the Senate at the ceremony itself. This academic year, the Senate has voted on the following reports thus transmitted to the Office of the President. They include the report on Charge S2104, Best Practices for Asynchronous Instruction. Consider and make recommendations on best practices for asynchronous instruction. Senate also voted on a resolution on mandatory vaccinations for faculty and staff. Before the governor had imposed his mandate, the Senate wanted to get out front on that particular issue. In November, the Senate received the report on charge S2107, review of the university policy 20.1.22, no smoking. This was an ad hoc committee convened to discuss whether Rutgers could go from smoke-free to tobacco-free. The ad hoc committee was charged to review the university no smoking policy and to consider renaming the policy to be inclusive of all tobacco products. The Senate voted in favor of a tobacco-free institution and voted in favor of the recommendations. This report has been transmitted to the Office of the President, as he mentioned earlier, and exemplifies, I think, the excellent work of the Senate. Senate is currently working on 23 additional charges to its committees and looking forward to as many reports prior to the end of this academic year. I have included all of these charges in my written report, and you can also find it on the website itself. Some in particular I would note include preparing graduate and professional students to teach in the 21st century, academic freedom, review of university policy 10.2.4 units of credit, research and information systems, and PTL pay and recognition, to name just a few. And with that, this concludes my report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair Oliver, thank you very much. Is there any old business to come before this board? Is there any new business to come before this board? Prior to adjournment, Mr. President, the last word is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have nothing further to add.
Thank you very much. May I have a motion for adjournment, please?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas, Happy holidays, everybody.
Holidays.